Gaius's guards closed the gate between me and the two men who had kept me alive. Tiro's face remained in the narrowing gap, pale with anger, his stitched left arm held close to his side. Cassian was behind him on a litter, one hand locked around the shaft of a practice spear. His fever had fallen during the night, but the cut behind his knee was still packed and marked in charcoal. He could not have crossed the yard without help. He looked ready to try. "Useful men stay alive," I called. Cassian answered first. "Try it yourself." The gate shut. I stood in Gaius Septim's holding yard with no shield, no spear, and a gladius I was permitted to wear because Secundus had forced the issue before witnesses. My right wrist remained splintered. Stitches pulled beneath the binding over my left hip. My scalp cut had clotted, my throat and ribs were bruised, and purple shadows still gathered whenever I looked toward white sky. The surgeon had forbidden eagle sight for 3 days. Gaius had called the order advice. 2 cavalrymen faced inward at the gate. A third waited outside my room. Protection according to the written order. Custody according to every hinge. I opened the system panel without using sight. Lucius Varro, level 5, experience 0 of 900, strength 10, endurance 11, agility 11, vitality 10, intelligence 12, skill echoes, shield hook practiced, spear check novice, 2 of 3 slots filled. Nothing had changed because a tribune wanted it to. That was the first comfort of the morning. A clerk arrived with breakfast and 6 questions. Had I dreamed of the eagle? Could I call it while bound? Could another man receive an echo by touching my blood? Did wounds close faster after a level? Would experience come from a Roman opponent? Who had taught me to refuse orders? Barley first, I said. He frowned. The tribune requires answers. The surgeon requires food with the medicine. Decide whose tablet you want stained when I vomit. He gave me the bowl. Gaius was teaching his staff that I could be inventoried. Cassian had taught me that inventories went both ways. The clerk's name was Levinus. He wore a new belt over a tunic mended twice at the shoulder. Ink marked his middle finger, but fresh blisters marked the others. He was a copyist pressed into riding service, not one of Gaius's old household men. When I asked whether he had seen the note recovered from the enemy arrow, his eyes moved to the gate. No. Eagle sight could not read lies. Ordinary fear said the subject had teeth. Trumpets sounded in the fort before he finished. One long call brought officers to the command house. A second brought the newly arrived supply escort into the yard. Men began loading shields, grain sacks, rope, axes, and empty prisoner collars onto 6 wagons. No march had been announced at the shared meal. Gaius entered wearing campaign mail beneath his white cloak. The cloak was clean. His boots were not. Mud climbed them to the calf, which meant he had inspected the south road before coming to me. He carried 3 sealed orders. The enemy attacked Roman stores at Vella Hill during the night, he said. They killed 4 station guards, took grain, and carried away families who served the post. We answer before their tracks cool, with a punitive raid, with lawful force against armed raiders and those who shelter them. You will accompany the column. The surgeon pushed through the gate behind him. He will not. Gaius did not turn. His legs work, his eyes bleed, his wrist cannot take a shield blow, his hip has been stitched twice. Then he will be kept from the shield line. That sounded like mercy until Gaius laid down the marching order. I would go with the forward file under Centurion Rufus, 3 bowshots ahead of the wagons. My task was to identify enemy strength and techniques. I would carry a spear but no shield until the wrist improved. Eagle sight would be used at Rufus's request. Cassian remained in the infirmary for questioning. Tiro returned to the recruit pool. Secundus held Marcellus's survivors inside the fort. Odo and Beron remained prisoners under staff seal. Sabinus, Marius, Nicanor, and Flaccus stayed where their wounds or duties had placed them. Gaius had separated every support without openly punishing any of them. He called it assignment. The forward file is where scouts shoot first, I said. You have unusual warning. Only after I see them, then look carefully. Rufus entered with a square, weathered face and a vine staff polished by use. He was level 8 when I risked one blink of sight despite the surgeon's hand on my shoulder. No hidden corruption appeared, no loyalty, no intention, only an old shoulder tear and a mastered skill named Short Wall. Pain pressed behind my eyes before I shut the gold away. The surgeon saw the purple shadow cross my vision. Again, and you may lose the day. Gaius said, "You obtained useful information." "I learned that an experienced centurion has an old wound," I answered. "His men could have told me." Rufus's mouth tightened, perhaps in amusement. He had not asked to be inspected. A woman stepped into the yard, carrying a wax tablet under one arm and a grain scoop in the other. She was perhaps 26, dressed in a plain traveling stola beneath a rain cloak, with no jewelry except a bronze seal ring. 2 quartermaster clerks followed her, both unhappy. "Tribune," she said, "you cannot issue 6 wagons from stores that contain enough sound axle grease for 4. You also ordered 40 sacks loaded, 11 are underweight, and 7 carry sweepings beneath the top grain." Gaius's displeasure became formal. "Livia Aureliana, this is a military response, not a market dispute. Hungry soldiers turn every response into a market dispute. My appointment covers the supply accounts attached to your command." She set 1 sack on its side and cut the lower seam. Damp husks spilled onto Gaius's clean paving. She did not look at me until the clerk whispered my name. Then her eyes went to the splint, the eye-cloth, and the placement of the guards. She did not look impressed. "Is this the recruit whose extraordinary value requires sending him forward without a shield?" Gaius smiled. "You audit grain, Livia. I audit losses. He appears entered in advance." That was how I met the first Roman in the fort who could wound Gaius with arithmetic. Livia delayed the march by half an hour and may have saved more lives in that time than any spear did that day. She rejected 7 grain sacks, 2 cracked water jars, 3 rotten shield straps, and a wagon wheel whose hub had been packed with wool to hide a split. She made each rejection in front of Rufus and required the quartermaster to mark it on wax. Gaius could overrule an auditor attached to supply accounts. He could not do it quietly. He chose 4 wagons, 33 sound sacks, and enough vinegar for wounds. The rejected material stayed in the yard under seal. I was given a light hunting shield after Livia asked which account would bear the cost if the unshielded military asset died. It was round, hide-covered, and too small for Roman line work. My splintered wrist could barely hold it. Gaius called the change proof that he listened to practical counsel. Rufus gave me a better spear. "Do not thank the auditor," he said as we formed. "She will charge it to someone." "Will you put me 3 bow shots ahead?" 2. "Mercy? I do not waste men to complete another officer's sentence. You go with 8 auxiliaries who know the hills. If contact comes, you fall back by pairs. If you see gold words, tell me after you close them. I will not have a blind oracle walking into my sanctuary." That did not make Rufus an ally. It made him a centurion who knew a damaged tool could cut the hand using it. The column held 84 soldiers, 40 legionaries from the garrison, 20 auxiliaries from the supply escort, 12 cavalry under Gaius, 8 bowmen, and 4 staff guards assigned to me. Gaius rode beside the first wagon, where every rank could see him. Rufus marched. Livia travelled with the account chest in the 3rd wagon, though Gaius suggested she remain behind. She answered that stolen grain could not be audited from a chair. No one from Marcellus's broken century was assigned to the raid. I saw Tiro once on the north tower as we passed through the gate. He held no flag. He scratched his cheek, touched 2 fingers to the parapet, then pointed south. Cassian's lesson in quiet signs returned to me. Watch the thing beside the loud thing. At the southern road marker, I saw 2 parallel scratches low on the stone, fresh. Tiro had found some way to reach the road before the gate closed, or had persuaded Flaccus to do it. 2 meant visible danger among the bore signals. Beneath it, a small clay chip had been pressed into mud on the east side. I told Rufus only what I observed. Someone marked east danger since the rain began. He sent 2 auxiliaries along the drainage bank rather than toward the obvious tree line. They found a cut tether and mule prints leading east. The raiders had taken a pack animal from the supply train before attacking Vella Hill. Their trail did not run north toward the nearest hill settlements. It bent southeast toward abandoned Roman charcoal pits. Gaius ordered the column north anyway. Vella first. Punishment must be visible. Rufus said, "The grain is going east. The post is north. We secure witnesses." It was plausible. Families might still be alive. Guards might have seen the attackers. Yet the enemy trail was the one fact they had failed to hide, and Gaius chose the road that placed villages between Rome and its anger. I walked in the forward file with an auxiliary named Hanno on my left and a young legionary called Pollio on my right. Hanno was from a mountain district west of the river and could read snapped fern stems without pretending the plants spoke. Pollio had joined 2 months before me and treated that difference as veteran status. "If your eyes tell you I am about to die," he said, "warn me politely. They cannot see the future. Then warn me rudely after." My hip began pulling before the second mile. Endurance 11 kept my breathing even, but every downhill step tugged the stitches. The small shield dragged on my wrist. Rufus noticed the change in my stride and shifted a staff guard to carry my pack. Gaius noticed and wrote something to Lavinus. The landscape narrowed into wet oak and low stone ridges. No horns sounded, no shield flashed. A woodpecker struck 3 times, waited, then struck twice. Hanno stopped. Wrong tree. Pollio whispered, "What?" No chips falling. The sound came again from our right, a signal made with antler against bark. We began to withdraw by pairs. An arrow struck Pollio through the loose cloth above his shoulder guard. Another hit my hunting shield so hard the splintered wrist went numb. Men rose from pits beneath leaf mats. Eagle sight could not have shown them before they moved. The enemy had chosen the moment when the forward file obeyed its own caution. They did not attack the scouts. They shot over us at the officers riding into the hollow. 1 arrow scraped Gaius's white cloak. A cavalryman fell with a shaft in his throat. Then 3 raiders rushed the rear of our file to keep us from closing on the archers. Hanno met the first with his oval shield. Pollio, arrow still in his shoulder cloth but not flesh, braced beside him. My right hand knew spear check. My feet stood on wet leaves over stone. I did not trust the echo to create ground. I scraped twice with my rear sandal, found rock, and set the spear butt beside it. The attacker struck. Force ran through the shaft, shoulder, hip, and earth. Pain opened beneath my binding, but the point stayed between us. Pollio thrust past it. Hanno drove his shield. The man fell and dropped his sword. Experience gained 130. Level 5. Experience 130 of 900. A second attacker dragged him backward before we could bind him. The third threw a short spear, not at me, but at Hanno's exposed calf. Pollio caught the shaft on his shield rim. We retreated toward Rufus while arrows shifted between gaps. The enemy withdrew before our bowmen climbed the ridge. Rufus forbade a chase. Gaius ordered one. Rufus obeyed with 6 auxiliaries and no cavalry, limiting the damage of the command. They found empty pits, 2 blood trails, and a bronze clasp shaped like crossed reeds. We had defeated 1 hostile attacker through meaningful participation. No one was helpless when the award came. No experience appeared for archers who escaped or for the men Rufus's auxiliaries never caught. The surgeon's assistant reopened my hip binding beside the first wagon. 3 stitches had held, 1 had pulled loose. My wrist had swollen against the splint, and purple spots floated at the edge of my sight, though I had not used eagle sight. Livia knelt near the dead cavalryman's horse, not the corpse. She measured the arrow's angle, then walked to the wagon ruts. They knew where the tribune would ride, Guilelist heard. White cloaks are visible. From the pits, they could see only the upper road for 6 breaths. They loosed before you reached it. She lifted Levinus's root tablet from its leather sleeve. The morning order placed Guiolist beside the first wagon at that exact hollow. "How many copies?" she asked. Levinus looked sick. 3. 1 for Gaius, 1 for Rufus, 1 sent to the quartermaster before dawn. Livia marked the crossed reed clasp beside the route entry. "The grain fraud and the ambush have begun sharing a column. Gaius took the tablet from her, or the enemy watched a road. Then we should discover which before giving him the next one." He ordered the column forward to Vella Hill. The station at Vella Hill had not been attacked during the night. It had been burning since before sunset. Rain preserved the lie badly. The roof beams were charred through, but the ash beneath them was cold and packed. 4 bodies lay near the gate in station tunics. Flies and stiffness gave the dead more honesty than Gaius's report. They had been killed at least a day earlier. Someone had delayed the alarm. The nearby settlement held 20 huts around a cattle yard. Doors stood open. Cooking stones were cold. We found 2 old women, a boy with a broken ankle, and a shepherd hiding beneath a wicker pen. Everyone else had been taken east. Rufus spread his men around the huts and posted bowmen on the ridge. Gaius ordered every building searched for stolen grain. The search became damage quickly. Soldiers who had marched hungry kicked jars open, cut bedding, and pulled roof thatch down. They were not monsters. They were tired men told that neighbors had fed the enemy. That made the danger more ordinary. A legionary found a Roman grain sack beneath one hut and dragged the owner, one of the old women, into the yard. The sack carried a fort stamp. Gaius's cavalry decurion called it proof of collaboration. Livia took the sack from him. She rubbed the stamp with vinegar. Black dye ran. "A real store mark is burned into the weave before issue," she said. "This was painted yesterday. The grain is local rye, not the fort's barley. Someone planted it." The old woman understood no Latin. She understood the sword near her neck. Gaius changed his order without apology. "Search for captives. Do not strike inhabitants unless they resist." He remained politically plausible because he corrected what witnesses could prove. He remained dangerous because he had issued the first order knowing what soldiers did with broad permission. Hanno questioned the shepherd in a hill dialect. 3 bands had joined at dusk 2 days earlier. Reed-marked scouts came first. Men with black boars came after. A third group carried white horsehair on their spears. They took grain from the station, killed the guards, gathered 37 villagers, and marched toward the charcoal pits. Their leader had a Roman map. One station clerk walked freely beside him. "Vibius?" I asked. The shepherd recognized the sound. "Bias," he said, then spat. The missing movement clerk from the southern station was alive, unless the name had been planted too. A scream came from the cattle yard. Enemy fighters had remained beneath piles of wet hides. 6 burst out after our search line passed. They cut the shepherd's throat first, killing the witness they could not carry. Then they attacked the old women and boy rather than the nearest soldiers. Enemies chose the threat. Romans answered late. I was 20 paces away without my spear. The surgeon's assistant had taken it while binding my hip. I had the hunting shield and gladius. One raider reached the boy. I ran. Agility 11 did not make the ground kind. Mud caught my left sandal. The hip wound pulled. I used the cattle rail to turn without wrenching the stitches, dropped beside the boy, and took a sword cut across the small shield. The blow drove my splintered wrist into the earth. The raider lifted for another strike. Eagle sight opened for less than a heartbeat. Level 4, injury, bruised right ribs, mastered skill, hide rush. Gold vanished under purple. I had learned enough. He favored the left turn because his right ribs resisted twisting. I rolled the shield toward that side. He chose the easier turn, exactly as pain suggested, and met Hanno's spear coming through the rail. The thrust pierced his thigh. He fell but kept his sword. I kicked the blade away and pinned his forearm until Pollio bound him. Experience gained 170. Level 5, experience 300 of 900. Across the yard, the other hidden fighters drove towards civilians. Rufus's legionaries formed pairs instead of chasing singles. Livia pulled the second old woman behind the stone well, then took the boy by his sound ankle and dragged him under a feeding trough. She carried no weapon. She did not wait for someone to assign her safety. Gaius killed one attacker himself with a cavalry spear. He did it cleanly and in front of his men. A dangerous officer did not have to be a coward. That would have made him simpler. 2 raiders escaped over the eastern fence. 3 died fighting. The man Hanno, wounded, surrendered once bound. The 6th, a scout with white horsehair on his spear, ran up the charcoal track. Rufus sent Hanno, Pollio, and 4 auxiliaries after him. Gaie pointed at me. Varro goes. The surgeon's assistant said, "His wound is open." Then close it when he returns. Livia stood from behind the trough with mud across her cloak. The auditor records direct orders that create predictable losses. "Record it," Gaie said. He wanted me exposed. If the white hair scout killed me, the raid had lost a volatile recruit to enemy action. If I prevailed, Gaiout could claim he had tested and directed me. If I refused, he had disobedience under witnesses. Every outcome served him except one in which I returned with proof no report could erase. I took my spear from the assistant. I go under Rufus's withdrawal rule. No blind chase. Rufus looked at Gaiout. "That is my standing order." Gaius nodded. "Bring the scout alive if practical." The scout had waited at the top of the charcoal track to hear our argument. His first arrow came down while I was still fastening the small shield. The shaft crossed where my chest had been, because Hanno struck me sideways. We entered the charcoal woods under fire. The track climbed between black mounds covered in turf, abandoned ovens that turned every bend into a blind wall. The white-hair scout stayed above us. He shot, moved, and shot from another angle before our bowmen could answer. 2 more hostile scouts joined him. They had planned the pursuit before hiding fighters in the village. Ordinary awareness kept us alive. Hanno read mud. Pollio watched branches. The auxiliaries moved from trunk to trunk, shields high. Eagle Sight could reveal a scout only while I saw him. It could not find the arrow already traveling from a hidden bow. The first shaft struck an auxiliary in the thigh. The second hit Pollio's shield. The third came at me from the left. I saw the bow bend. A brief gold mark showed the white-hair scout at level 6, agility 14. Mastered skill, arrow step. Injury, none. Pain drove a spike behind my eyes. I closed sight. The scout released, shifted 1 short pace sideways on the sloped track, and vanished behind a charcoal mound before Pollio's javelin reached him. The movement was not a leap and not a miracle. He read the bow hand, set his outside foot on firm ground, and moved laterally during the breath when a shooter committed. It changed his line without turning his shoulders away from the threat. He used it because our bowman had exposed himself to answer. A hidden arrow struck the Roman through the neck. Arrow step had not saved him. Awareness of the second shooter had. 2 bows high right, Pollio shouted. Hanno had already moved. He led us into the cut between ovens where the high bows lost angle. The white-hair scout abandoned distance and came down with a long knife. He expected us to keep looking uphill. The auxiliary behind me saw him first and took the knife under his arm. I turned too late to prevent the wound. Spear check would not help at knife distance. Shield hook needed a shield rim. I rammed the butt of my spear into the scout's hip, not as an echo, simply as a farmer who knew poles. Pollio caught his knife wrist. Hanno drove into his legs. The scout slipped free. Arrow step carried him 1 pace across our front as Pollio thrust. He found stone without looking. His knife cut Hanno's cheek. Then he used the movement again. This time I watched the ground instead of the skill. Rain had washed charcoal dust across the track. Firm stones showed pale. Between them lay black paste. The scout's next safe lateral step had only 1 landing. I offered him the line. I lowered my spear point and looked at his knife. He read an opening and shifted toward the pale stone as Pollio attacked. I put my hunting shield there first. The small rim caught his shin. Arrow step needed footing and timing. I stole the footing. He fell sideways into an oven wall, struck his knife hand, and still tried to rise. Hanno, cheek bleeding, pinned his shoulders. Pollio kicked the knife away. The wounded auxiliary laid a spear point against his throat. The scout stopped fighting. Experience gained 250. Level 5. Experience 550 of 900. Skill Echo available. Arrow Step. Capture? I considered the slot before answering. One remained. Arrow Step used equipment I already faced and movement a shield soldier could practice. It was short, lateral motion under missile fire, not speed without limit. It required visible release, sound footing, room beside me, and correct timing. It could not dodge a missile hidden by smoke, darkness, a wall, another body, or my own blindness. It could not replace watching for a second bow. Used inside a tight Roman line, it might collide with an ally. Used on mud, it might put me on my back. I captured it. Skill Echo acquired. Arrow Step, Novice. Echo slots, 3 of 3. Knowledge touched my ankles and hips like a remembered stumble. My body tried to settle into a stance it had never drilled. The injured hip cramped. I nearly fell without any arrow near me. Hanno caught my harness. Powerful. I am demonstrating the failure condition. The defeated scout laughed once through blood on his teeth. His name was Sen. Hanno questioned him while the auxiliaries bound his hands in front and packed the wounded man's knife cut. Sen belonged to the White Mane, a hill oath that had feuded with the Reed Oath until Armin forced both to send scouts under one command. He would say no more about numbers. He did not need to. His bronze neck ring carried 3 joined marks: Reed, White Mane, and Black Boar. In his pouch we found a tally stick cut with 3 different clan signs, each beside a count of grain measures and fighting men. Pollio found a strip of scraped Roman wax wrapped in oiled skin. Beneath the scraping, angled letters remained. Vibius had copied root abbreviations carelessly enough to leave ghosts. Wood, wax, and careless Roman letters could not change their story under questioning. The 2 hidden archers withdrew when we defeated Sen. Rufus's rule kept us from following. We carried our wounded auxiliary back to Vella Hill. Sen walked bound between Hanno and Pollio. I walked badly. Every attempt to test arrow step pulled at the hip and made the novice guidance conflict with my old balance. At the village, Gaius reached for Sen's tally stick. Livia took it first with a cloth so the wax and charcoal marks would not smear. Captured supply evidence enters the audit chest under 2 seals. Military intelligence enters my custody, Gaius said. Then place your seal beside mine. Rufus added his centurion's mark. 3 witnesses watched the objects locked away. Gaius could still control my body through orders. He had lost quiet control of the evidence. We buried the 4 station guards before leaving Vella. The shepherd had no family left to claim him, so the villagers buried him beside them. Gaius allowed 1 hour. Rufus took 2. Livia inspected the station store while soldiers dug. The account tablet said 60 measures of barley had arrived 6 days earlier. The bins held sweepings equal to perhaps 8. Cart ruts showed 3 wagons had left before the station burned, not the 1 wagon named in the alarm. Mule dung contained whole oats, a ration used by Gaius's cavalry train and rarely wasted on hill carts. Someone moved the grain under Roman escort, she said. Gaius answered, or stole our fodder with it. The iron wheel bands are the same width as the supply wagons issued from the southern station. Hill carts run narrower. She measured with cord. She did not accuse him of theft because evidence had not reached him. She built a chain from invoice to bin, bin to rut, rut to animal feed, and root tablet to ambush. Gaius had to answer each link separately. That kept him plausible and kept her alive. The old woman whose hut had received the planted sack gave Livia a clay seal found beneath her threshold. It carried a Roman merchant's dolphin. Nicanor was not with us to identify it, but Livia knew the account house. The seal belonged to a contractor paid to haul military grain from the southern station. Rain thickened. Rufus wanted to return to the fort with Sen, the tally stick, and the wax strip. The captives remained east. 37 civilians and perhaps surviving station workers had been marched toward the charcoal pits. Their tracks would vanish by morning. Gaius called his officers beneath the cattle shelter. We continue east, recover Roman stores, and punish the armed settlement sheltering the alliance. What armed settlement? Rufus asked. Gaius unrolled a map. It showed a hill enclosure named Derva beyond the pits. The shepherd had not mentioned Derva. Sen gave no reaction. Livia looked at the map's lower corner, copied by Vibius. Before he deserted, Gaius said, or while he served whoever paid him, the route to Derva crossed a narrow shelf called the Goat's Back. A forward file would be visible from both ridges. Gaius assigned me to it again. He also ordered Sen marched beside me without shield cover, hoping perhaps that allied archers would kill witness and target together. I said, "The prisoner stays behind the first shield file. You do not assign march order. You ordered him brought alive if practical. Exposing him to his own archers is not practical." Gaius's voice stayed calm. "You are a protected staff subject attached for evaluation, not a legionary, not an officer. You will take your place." Rufus said, "The prisoner is mine until delivered. He marches center." Gaius could have overruled him. 40 legionaries watched, so did cavalry, auxiliaries, an auditor, and clerks who had seen planted evidence. Political command was not only power, it was the cost of spending power where everyone could count it. Center, Gaius agreed. Varro forward. He gave me no impossible command, only the dangerous duty scouts normally performed. That was how he remained lawful while arranging the odds. We left 4 soldiers with the villagers and boy. The rest marched east. Livia placed the audit chest in the second wagon and walked beside it rather than ride. Sen remained bound behind Rufus's file. He watched my limp. Through Hanno, he said, "Your new step is broken. Novice." Same word. He explained nothing. Skill Echo had captured the movement, not his teaching. I had to learn by failure. On a flat stretch, I watched Pollio toss pebbles at my feet. The first short lateral step tangled with my spear. The second landed too wide and pulled the hip. The third crossed my ankles, which Cassian would have punished with language. "Outside foot tests ground," Hanno said after watching Sen's earlier motion. "Inside foot follows." Sen looked away, but not before I saw annoyance. Hanno had read part of it. I tried again. Test, shift, settle, short. My shoulders remained toward the imagined bow. The spear stayed close. The small shield covered center. It was not fast. It was less wrong. The first enemy sling stone came from behind us. Scouts had circled Vella while we debated. They struck the rear wagon, cut a mule trace, and fired clay jars of hot pitch into the baggage. Another group appeared ahead on Goat's Back. The alliance initiated on both ends, using our road order against us. Gaius ordered cavalry up the shelf. Rufus ordered legionaries around the wagons. The commands collided. Half the mounted men surged forward, half stayed to protect the tribune. That hesitation told the enemy exactly where commands sat. White Mane archers rose on the right ridge. Reed slingers stood left. Black Boar shieldmen blocked the narrow shelf ahead. 3 oaths, 1 attack. The tally stick had not lied. Arrows came down before our shields locked. I saw the right ridge bowline and felt arrow step pull at my stance. The echo offered movement when a visible archer committed. I watched one bow, tested ground with the outside foot, and shifted left as he released. The arrow passed my right arm. A hidden slinger struck me in the ribs from the other ridge. Pain emptied my lungs. I dropped behind Pollio's shield. Arrowstep had answered the threat I saw and moved me into the one I did not. Awareness had to choose the movement. The echo could not. "Left stones!" Hanno shouted. Rufus formed short wall around the wagons, 6 shields facing each ridge and 8 toward the Black Boar block. Livia cut the panicked led mule free before its kicking broke the wagon pole. Levinus and another clerk threw account tablets into the iron chest, then rolled it beneath the wagon bed. They acted without waiting for the auditor. Sen went flat when his own people shot. One arrow struck the shield above him. He shouted toward the ridge. Hanno translated only after the volley. He says captives are below the east drop. If we burn the wagons, fire runs down to them. A pitch jar had already broken in the rear baggage. Flame climbed the cover. Gaius ordered the wagon pushed over the east edge to clear the road. Livia stood in front of the wheel. There are people below. A prisoner claims it. The wind confirms it. Listen. Between arrow strikes, I heard screaming beneath the shelf. Gaius heard too. His jaw tightened. Cut the burning cover, save the wagon if possible. Again he changed when witnesses made cruelty expensive. I crawled to the rear with Pollio. The pitch-soaked canvas had stuck beneath the grain ropes. A legionary sawed at it while shieldmen covered him. A white-hair scout rushed from behind the wagon and stabbed the legionary through the thigh. The enemy had climbed the east face among the captives. I met him at 3 paces. Spear check set the point. My rear foot found packed gravel, but the bruised ribs weakened the brace. His shield struck. I gave 1 step instead of pretending strength, turned the point, and Pollio attacked over my shoulder. The scout shifted laterally with arrow step. He had room. Pollio missed. I knew where the movement wanted to end. Shield hook could not catch his oval hide shield cleanly from my damaged wrist. I used the hunting shield to block the landing space, just as I had with Sen. The scout changed direction halfway. Novice arrow step guidance warned me what that demanded from his knee. He slipped on loose edge gravel. He did not fall helpless. He thrust from one knee and cut Pollio's calf. I struck his weapon arm with the spear shaft. Pollio kept his feet. A legionary from the rear wall drove a shield into the scout and bound him. Experience gained, 350. Level 6 reached. Experience 0 of 1,200. 2 free stat points available. The arithmetic was exact. 130 in the road ambush, 170 at the Vella cattle yard, 250 for Sen in the charcoal track, and 350 at Goat's Back. Total 900. From 0, that met the 900 threshold with no overflow. The system offered strength while fire spread and arrows fell. I needed footing for arrow step and enough reserve to survive the injury workload. I allocated 1 point to agility and 1 to vitality. Strength 10, endurance 11, agility 12, vitality 11, intelligence 12. The change hurt, my calves seized first. The hip wound burned beneath its packing. Bruised ribs tightened until breath came in thin cuts. Vitality did not close the stitch or erase the sling blow. It gave my body a little more capacity to carry damage. Agility did not teach arrow step. It made the balance correction slightly less desperate. The burning cover came free. Pollio and 2 clerks dragged it onto bare rock and beat it with wet cloaks. Livia took command of the grain wagon because no officer stood near enough. She had sacks cut open and poured damp barley over the pitch. Food became earth against fire. She marked every sacrificed measure aloud so no quartermaster could later call it theft. Ahead, Gaius led cavalry against the Black Boar block. He did not charge the shields. He sent 4 riders uphill as if flanking right, then brought the rest left when the boar line turned. It was competent. Rufus advanced his front wall at the same breath. The enemy block yielded 3 paces. They had wanted us to push. The shelf edge collapsed beneath the first Roman rank. 2 men fell into brush. Black Boar fighters countercharged. Rufus's short wall bent around the hole. Hanno left my side without order and ran to warn the center file. Sen, still bound, shouted the boar charge rhythm, 1 beat before their leader called it. Roman shields set in time. Allies and prisoners acted from their own judgment. The line held because they did. I went down the east face with Pollio and 3 auxiliaries toward the captives. Gaius had ordered the forward block broken, not a rescue. Rufus saw us and sent 6 more men without waiting for Gaius. 37 villagers were tied in pairs among scrub oak. 5 armed guards moved through them with knives, cutting anyone who tried to climb. They were not defending prisoners. They were erasing witnesses before retreat. 1 guard saw us and killed a bound man before we reached the first tree. The raid changed shape in that instant. We had come to survive Gaius's test and bring proof home. Now survival required stopping enemy blades without letting Roman anger finish their work afterward. The slope below Goat's Back was too steep for a shield line. Roots, limestone shelves, and tied civilians broke every straight path. The 5 guards knew it. They moved among bodies so arrows and thrown spears risked killing captives. Rufus's 6 legionaries started down behind us. Above, the road battle continued. We had perhaps 50 breaths before the boar block withdrew through the prisoners, or Gaius ordered fire into the brush. The nearest guard held a woman by the hair. I could see him. Eagle sight showed level 3, no mastered skill, and a cut left thumb. Eye pain returned at once. The mark told me less than his knife. Drop weapons and live as prisoners, I called through Hanno. The guard cut the woman's neck, not deep enough to kill at once, deep enough to answer. Pollio threw his javelin. The guard pulled the woman into its path. Hanno struck Pollio's wrist upward. The javelin passed over both. A second guard attacked from behind a captive pair. I saw his spear move and used arrow step. Outside foot tested a dry route. Short lateral shift. The spear passed my hip, but my small shield struck a bound boy beside me. He fell. A movement safe for one fighter could harm the crowded innocent. I stopped using it. We advanced with shields low and swords sheathed. Hanno threw dirt into the first guard's eyes. Pollio caught the hostage around the waist and pulled her down. I struck the knife hand with my spear butt. Rufus's legionary pinned the guard alive. Experience gained 220. Level 6, experience 220 of 1200. The other guards began killing in earnest. Captives did not remain passive. An older man rolled into one guard's knees while tied to his daughter. A woman used the rope between her wrists to catch a knife arm. 2 boys kicked loose stones downhill, forcing another guard to cover his face. Sen came down the slope behind the Romans, still bound. Rufus had not sent him. He had slipped his escort during the road fight, then chosen not to run toward his people. He shouted to the white-hair guard holding the rear path. Hanno translated while fighting. He names him Oathbreaker, says Armin ordered living witnesses gathered, not butchered. The guard answered with a spear thrust at Sen. Sen moved 1 arrow step sideways despite bound hands. He had watched the point and tested the route. The thrust missed. He rammed his shoulder into the guard. Both fell among the scrub. I reached them first. The guard rolled over Sen with a knife. Shield hook needed a rim. Spear check needed distance. I used neither. I seized his knife wrist with both hands and paid for it in the splinted right wrist. Bone seemed to grind beneath the wrap. Sen drove his forehead into the man's nose. Hanno kicked the knife away. No experience appeared for me when we bound him, because Sen and Hanno had done more to defeat him than I had. The system's silence was accurate. The last 2 guards retreated east, dragging a captive station worker. One blew a horn. Answering horns rose beyond the lower trees. The Alliance had another force moving toward us. Rufus reached the prisoners and began cutting ropes. Can they walk? 30 could. 7 were wounded badly. 1 man was dead from the first knife. The woman cut at the neck lived because Livia came down with linen and pressed the wound before the surgeon's assistant arrived. She had left the account chest under Levinus's seal and followed the work that created losses. Gaius descended after the black boar block withdrew. His white cloak was torn at the hem and blood marked his spear. He saw the planted grain contractor among the captives, a station mule driver named Corvin, and questioned him at once. Corvin said Vibius had arrived with signed orders to transfer grain east. 12 Roman cavalry escorted the wagons. Their shields carried no unit marks. At the charcoal camp, Reed, Whitemane, and Boar chiefs exchanged oath rings over a Roman route map. Armin was not present. His spear captain, Ragin, accepted the grain in his name. Vibius paid northern informants with Roman silver, then rode toward Derva. Can you identify the escort? Gaius asked. 2 faces, perhaps 3. Gaius looked toward his own cavalry. Eagle sight could not tell which men Corvin feared. Livia solved the immediate danger without magic. She asked each cavalryman to state where he had been 6 days earlier and had Lavinus record answers separately. 2 men contradicted the stable issue ledger about their horses. Gaius placed them under guard before they could speak together. That protected evidence and protected him from appearing complicit. Whether he had known of the grain diversion remained unanswered. The captive station workers showed us 3 oath rings taken from slain chiefs and hung on a cord as proof of receipt. Reed bronze, white iron, boar silver. The guards had missed the cord beneath a dead driver's tunic. Livia entered it under both seals beside Sen's tally stick. We now held witnesses, physical marks, Roman wax, and supply chronology. None would matter if we failed to return with them alive. Horns below the trees multiplied. Ragin's force had closed the east path. The goat's back behind us was damaged and watched by archers. Gaius's punitive raid had found an alliance large enough to swallow it. Rufus refused to climb back onto the exposed shelf with 7 wounded civilians. Gaius refused to retreat to Vella without the grain. Livia pointed out that 33 sound sacks had become 29 after the fire and rescue, while stolen Roman barley waited in the charcoal camp below. Leaving it would feed the force pursuing us. Taking it would slow us. Burn it, Gaius said. Corvin shook his head. Captives in the sheds, families from 2 other posts. The enemy had built every choice around someone else's body. We moved toward the camp in 2 groups. Rufus led shields through the upper trees with civilians inside the formation. Gaius took cavalry along a wider logging track. I remained with Rufus by his order, not Gaius's. Livia walked beside Corvin and reconstructed the camp inventory from his memory. 3 grain wagons, 1 salt cart, 2 remount pens, a record hut, 6 prisoner sheds, and a charcoal store. Sen offered to guide us by a drainage cut. Rufus did not free him. He put a long rope on the bonds and gave the end to Hanno. Trust was not blindness. The drainage cut ended behind the first prisoner shed. 2 enemy sentries were already killing captives through the wall slats. They had heard our horns and begun destroying proof. Pollio shouted before silence could help us. 1 sentry turned and threw a spear. It struck Hanno's shield. The other set the straw wall alight. Rufus's legionaries attacked the sentries. Livia and Corvin went to the shed door. I followed because smoke hid the archers above. Eagle sight would have shown nothing useful and cost vision. We used axes to break the crossbar. Captives pushed from inside without waiting to be rescued. The door fell outward. Enemy arrows entered the smoke. I saw 1 bow at the instant of release and used arrow step. Outside foot, short shift, shoulders square. The arrow grazed my mail instead of entering beneath the arm. A second hidden shaft struck the hunting shield. The impact twisted the injured wrist and drove me against the shed. The limits arrived together. 1 visible missile avoided. 1 hidden missile not avoided. Footing held because packed charcoal was level. Awareness came from Pollio's warning, not the echo. Rufus's line defeated both sentries and took 1 alive. I had not meaningfully helped. No award came. We freed 18 prisoners from the first shed. 5 could not walk. Livia ordered grain doors used as litters. Corvin found the keys to the other sheds on the bound sentry. Families broke themselves out before soldiers reached them. A woman named Mara organized children behind the charcoal wall and counted them twice. She had been captive 4 days and knew every guard change. Record hut, she said in rough Latin. Men take marks there. Roman man burns marks now. Vibius. I ran with Pollio and Hanno. The hut stood beyond 3 grain wagons. Flames showed inside its shutters. Vibius came through the rear carrying a leather dispatch tube. He wore a Roman clerk's tunic beneath a northern cloak. "Stop," Pollio called. Vibius threw the tube into a charcoal oven and drew a short sword. He was no helpless clerk. He attacked Hanno with practiced speed, cut the auxiliary's shield strap, and drove toward the trees. Eagle sight showed level 5, intelligence 14, mastered skill, ledger knife, injury, smoke in lungs. The sight cost me half the scene. Purple covered my left vision. I closed it and followed Pollio's voice. Vibius slashed the lead mule's trace. The animal reared between us. He knew wagons and accounts well enough to turn logistics into terrain. Hanno went right, Pollio went left. I could not see either through the mule. I listened for sandals under the animal's scream. Cassian's last drill returned. Leather creak, breath, the quiet thing beside the loud one. Vibius scraped near the left wheel. I moved there without arrow step. His sword came under the wagon. Spear check caught the blade on the shaft rather than his body. He cut twice, trying to reach my splinted wrist. I gave ground around the wheel and kept him visible. Hanno appeared behind him with a broken shield strap looped between both hands. Vibius turned. Pollio struck his sword wrist with the flat of his blade. I put the spear point at his chest. "You are worth more speaking," I said. He lunged onto the point by choice. I pulled back, but iron entered below his collarbone. Hanno tackled him before he could drive deeper. The wound bled hard. He was defeated and alive when we bound him. Experience gained 280. Level 6, experience 500 of 1,200. We broke the charcoal oven apart. The leather tube had burned on one side, but the bronze cap protected a rolled sheet of thin bark inside. Livia opened it under witnesses. It listed Roman stations, departure times, officer names, and payments beside clan signs. Some entries used Gaius's staff cipher. Gaius arrived with cavalry from the logging road and saw the cipher before anyone could hide it. "Every dispatch copy passes my staff," he said. "That proves access, not source." "Correct," Livia said. "We preserve it and test the handwriting." She did not make the accusation he expected. She gave evidence room to become worse. Ragin's horn sounded from the east edge of camp. Black boar shields appeared among grain wagons. Reed slingers climbed the charcoal mounds. White mane archers took the logging track behind Gaius's horses. The Alliance had let us enter because we gathered its prisoners into one place. Now it closed the camp. Ragin carried a spear with 3 bronze collars beneath its head. He stood behind 20 black boar shields while Reed and white mane fighters spread around both flanks. More than 60 enemies were visible. Others remained behind huts and ovens. Eagle sight could count only one target at a time and would blind me long before it measured the field. Rufus had 63 soldiers still fit to fight, 9 cavalry, and more than 70 civilians and prisoners to protect. Numbers alone looked close. Terrain, wounds, arrows, fire, and divided duties made them unequal. Ragin called in Latin. Armin had taught more than one northern captain the language of Rome. "Give the gold-eyed one, the clerk, and the oath cord. Take your wagons and people west." Gaius rode into the open between lines. "Return Roman grain and surrender the murderers of station guards." The station sold us grain. The guards died because Roman payment came late. "Ask your woman with tablets." Livia did not answer a battlefield taunt. She asked Corvin whether any sale had been entered. It had not. Ragin planted his spear. "Varro can end this." Gaius looked at me. The calculation was visible without eagle sight. If I stepped forward, Ragin might capture the power Gaius wanted. If I refused publicly, Gaius could frame the refusal as civilians dying for me. He wanted control, not my immediate death now that I had survived the test. The raid had proved I could gain levels under his orders. A living weapon had become more valuable. "No," I said to Ragin. "Release your Roman informants and withdraw. You command nothing." He was right in law. The civilians behind our shields heard me answer anyway. Ragin raised one hand. White mane archers loosed into the prisoner sheds. They initiated the final attack by aiming past soldiers at families. Mara moved the children before any Roman order. Livia had already stationed wet grain doors above them. Arrows thudded into wood. Laevinus and the clerks dragged the audit chest beneath a wagon and then joined the litter line. Corvin led captives through the drainage cut toward the upper trees. Sen shouted white mane release counts. Hanno translated them into Latin beats. Rufus made short wall around the moving civilians. Gaius ordered cavalry against the archers, then led them himself because no subordinate could cross the arrow lane first without appearing sacrificed. His charge forced the right ridge down but left Ragin room at center. Black boar shields struck Rufus's wall. I took a place in the second rank with the hunting shield tied to my forearm, so the splinted hand did not bear every impact. Spear check at novice guided the brace. The first charge hit. My point found a shield, not flesh. Rear foot held on level charcoal, then slid when spilled grain rolled beneath it. I dropped the spear before it levered my shoulder from its joint. Cassian's voice lived in the decision. A named movement was not worth an arm. Pollio returned the spear. Hanno called arrows. When a visible bow committed, I used one short arrow step inside the gap Rufus deliberately opened. The shaft passed. I returned before the neighboring shield closed. A second use would have collided with a legionary, so I stayed. Ragin entered the wall behind his first rank. His spear collars rang against Roman shields. Eagle sight flashed once. Level 9, strength 15, endurance 15, agility 13, mastered skills, boar drive, spear bind, injury, old break, left hand. Purple darkness swallowed the lower half of him. I closed sight and told Rufus, old left-hand break, he binds spears. Rufus passed it down the line. Soldiers stopped contesting Ragin shaft to shaft. They struck the weapon near his left grip, withdrew, and made him reset. Ordinary formation turned one visible weakness into shared action. Ragin changed targets. He drove toward Livia's wagon, not me. The audit chest held the Alliance proof. His fighters hooked the wheel and tried to drag it beyond our wall. Livia cut the wagon traces so the frightened mule could not pull it into them. Laevinus threw himself across the chest. A reed fighter struck him in the back with a club. I left the second rank. Rufus shouted my name, but Hanno had already moved to cover the gap. Allies did not wait for me, and my choice cost them work. Ragin met me beside the wheel. His spear bound mine exactly as sight warned. I released the shaft before he could turn my wrist. He thrust at my throat. Arrow step offered a lateral line, but the wagon wheel blocked my right, and burning straw blocked my left. Skill without room was no skill. I dropped under the thrust. The bruised ribs screamed. My hip binding tore. Ragin struck down with the butt. The hunting shield took it and split. He kicked me against the chest. Livia opened the account chest behind him and removed the oath cord, making the object he sought no longer where he expected. She handed it to Mara, who vanished among the captive line. Livia then struck Ragin's old left hand with the bronze seal weight. It did not defeat him. It made him look. Pollio tackled his spear arm. Hanno looped the broken shield strap around the shaft. Rufus drove his short wall inward on the boar fighters, trying to reach their captain. Sen shouted something that made two white-maned scouts hesitate. Later, Hanno told me he had named Ragin a thief of oaths for killing captives. I found my dropped spear. Spear check was meant to stop oncoming force. Ragin came at Livia with a knife. Rear foot beside the wagon hub, butt close, point beyond. I braced. He struck harder than any level 5 body could stop alone. Pollio held his knife arm. Hanno pulled the strap. Livia moved out of line. Rufus's shield wall denied retreat. My spear point entered Ragin's shoulder and turned him. He fell against the wagon rather than through me. He remained hostile, reaching for the knife with his good hand. Sen stepped forward and ordered him to yield under the 3-oath law. Ragin spat at him. Gaius returned from the archers and placed a cavalry spear at Ragin's throat. Alive, I said. Gaius could have killed him and called it battle. Too many witnesses knew surrender was possible. He kicked the knife away. Ragin yielded. Experience gained 400. Level 6, experience 900 of 1200. The Alliance attack did not end because its captain fell. Reed slingers continued from the ovens. White mane archers withdrew by pairs. Black boar fighters tried twice to recover Ragin. Rufus kept the wall together. Gaius used cavalry to threaten flanks without chasing into trees. Mara and Corvin moved civilians through the drainage cut. Livia stayed with Laevinus until he could breathe, then resealed the account chest with the evidence that remained. We had defeated a captain. We still had to escape his army. Rufus turned the withdrawal into 2 columns occupying the same road. The outer column was shields and spears, facing whichever oath attacked. The inner column was civilians, wounded, prisoners, records, and grain door litters. It moved 10 paces whenever the outer wall found ground, then stopped while the wall folded around it again. Gaius wanted speed. Rufus wanted shape. Livia wanted a count at every stop. None could have all 3. We abandoned 2 captured grain wagons after soaking their barley in the mud. We took 1 wagon for those unable to walk and loaded the audit chest beneath the wounded, where enemies would have to reach people before proof. The remaining grain went into blankets and shield covers. Civilians carried what had fed their captors. Ragin walked bound beside Rufus. Vibius lay on a grain door litter, his chest wound packed. Sen remained tied but moved freely enough to call signals. The 2 suspected cavalrymen from Gaius's escort were disarmed and separated. The hostile scout from the cattle yard walked with a rope around his waist. Prisoner did not mean forgotten status. It meant another body the formation had promised not to murder. The first attack came at the drainage cut. Reed slingers rolled stones down the banks and rushed the rear. I saw 1 visible sling and used arrow step on packed soil. The stone missed. My injured hip failed on recovery. I fell against Pollio and opened his guard. A Roman behind us took the next stone on his helmet because he closed the gap I created. Novice, Pollio said through his teeth. Same word as broken. Sen laughed despite the rope. His mockery had become instruction by persistence. We stopped the rush with shields, not gold. Hanno found a shallow side channel and led 6 civilians around the blocked cut. Mara organized those already through into a rope line to pull litters. Livia counted 73 civilians at the first stop, then 72. She went back herself and found an old man beneath a grain blanket, too ashamed to say he had fallen. Count restored, 73. The second attack came in the oak slope. White Mane archers shot horses to collapse the road. Gaius's last remount fell across the outer wall. He cut the saddle free and fought on foot. That mattered to cavalrymen who had begun to wonder whether they guarded a tribune or his escape. Ragin called to the archers. They shot at him too. His defeat had not dissolved the alliance. It had released competing commands. He looked less surprised than angry. Armin built this, I said through Hanno. Why do they ignore his captain? Ragin answered in Latin. Armin binds chiefs. He does not make them sheep. Independent enemies were harder than a single will. Capturing 1 leader could not switch them off. At the Vella track, 3 black boar fighters showed white wool and offered to exchange safe passage for Ragin. Gaius considered it. Rufus asked whether passage included civilians. The fighters said Romans could take Roman captives. Hill families remained under clan judgment. Mara understood enough Latin to step beside Livia. No. The hill captives answered in their own language. The sound traveled through the inner column before any officer spoke. Gaius rejected the bargain because accepting it publicly would turn a rescue into surrender of witnesses. His motive might have been honor, politics, or the proof in the wagon. Eagle sight could not separate them. The result protected people. The boar fighters attacked after their wool fell. Ragin shouted their first movement. Rufus shifted the wall. I helped defeat 1 shieldman who climbed over the dead horse, using shield hook on his rim while Pollio struck his leg. Practiced rank kept my elbow close and spared the worst of the wrist, but the man's grip nearly tore the splint away. He was bound after dropping his sword. Experience gained, 300. Level 7 reached. Experience, 0 of 1,600. 2 free stat points available. The full threshold arithmetic closed. At level 6, 220 came from defeating the hostage guard, 280 from defeating armed Vibius, 400 from Ragin, and 300 from the Velatrack shieldman. Total 1,200. Added to 0 reached the threshold exactly, with no overflow. The system offered points while the enemy still pressed. Endurance had carried too much injury on too little sleep. Intelligence governed no magic answer, but attention had found ruts, sounds, and timing after sight failed. I chose 1 endurance and 1 intelligence. Strength 10, endurance 12, agility 12, vitality 11, intelligence 13. The change tightened every tired muscle. My lungs found a deeper breath. The hip remained open beneath the binding. The wrist remained swollen. Purple shadow remained across half my left eye. Level 7 did not remove a single wound. It gave me enough reserve to stand and enough clarity to stop trying the same bad step. No more experience came during the withdrawal. We drove enemies away, but I did not meaningfully help defeat a particular hostile opponent. Some escaped. Some yielded to other soldiers. Some merely stopped pursuing. The system did not reward survival as if it were a kill. At dusk, we reached Vella. The 4 soldiers left with the villagers had fortified the cattle yard. They had also found Tiro. He stepped from behind the well wearing a recruit shield and an expression of careful innocence. His stitched arm was bound against his chest. Flaccus stood beside him with a new cut above one eyebrow. Gaius stopped in the gate. You were assigned to the fort. Tiro held out Secundus's sealed message. Optio Secundus sent warning that the East Trail joined the Southern Contractor Road. We reached Vella after your column left. Then scouts surrounded the village. Returning would have crossed them. Every statement was true. None explained how eagerly he had accepted the errand. Flaccus had brought more than a warning. He carried copies of the fort quartermaster issue records, sealed by Secundus and the fort commander. Livia compared them beside the fire. The wagon widths, contractor dolphin, cavalry oat issue, and missing grain entries matched what she had found. Gaius had separated me from my allies. They had acted without me and brought the other half of the proof. Cassian was not with them. His fever had risen again after Tiro left. He remained in the infirmary, furious and alive. Sabinus's shoulder was stable. Marius's thigh fever had eased. Nicanor could speak short phrases. Odo and Baran remained under the fort commander's guard, not moved to Gaius's cellar. Secundus still held Marcellus's survivors together. Every status mattered because we had to get back to them. We could have stayed behind Vella's cattle fence until morning. Gaius chose to march at moonrise because 3 alliance groups were gathering on the northern ridge. Rufus agreed. The wounded needed surgeons. Vibius needed one before his lung filled, and evidence left in a village was evidence waiting to burn. The danger inside our column sharpened before the gate opened. One of Gaius's detained cavalrymen, Afer, asked to relieve himself. His guard loosened the wrist rope. Afer drew a thin blade hidden in his boot and ran at Vibius's litter. Tiro saw the movement from the well. He did not look for me. He threw his clay charm. It struck the guard's helmet and made him turn. Flaccus tackled Afer from the side. The blade cut Flaccus above the brow instead of entering Vibius's throat. Afer kept fighting until Rufus struck his wrist with the vine staff. He was a hostile Roman under arms, but I had not contributed. No experience came. The rule named meaningful participation, not proximity or ownership of a conflict. Gaius ordered Afer questioned at once. Livia objected to blows because a coerced answer would contaminate the account inquiry. Rufus objected because the man was a soldier under charge. Gaius allowed no beating. Again, rules held because several people held different ends. Afer admitted escorting grain to the charcoal camp. He claimed orders bore Gaius's seal. The seal had come through Vibius. He had never received payment from Gaius directly. His partner, the second detained rider, denied everything until Livia showed him the oat issue entry, proving both horses left the southern station on the transfer day. Then he named a staff quartermaster called Caldus. Caldus was at the fort. Gaius sent no rider ahead. Any warning might let Caldus flee, and any rider might be the warning. We would return together. On the moonlit road, Roman soldiers muttered about the captives. Their friends had died at the hill station. They had seen enemy guards cut bound throats. Some wanted every northern prisoner killed before another ambush. The hatred had reasons. Reasons did not make it safe. At a stream crossing, a legionary shoved the bound cattle yard scout to his knees and drew a sword. He hid under hides while they killed Dento. The scout had not killed Dento. Dento might have been one of the station dead or someone from another fight. Grief had stopped caring. I stepped between them with no shield left. He was bound after hostile defeat. Move, Gold Eyes. I was level 7 now. That did not grant rank. I remained a protected staff subject, not recognized legionary, with authority over no one. Rufus arrived before the sword moved. My prisoner, my discipline, sheath it. The legionary obeyed the centurion, not me. That was lawful structure protecting a man when personal strength could not. Gaius watched. Compassion for enemies is an expensive habit. So is killing witnesses. You think like the auditor. Livia answered from behind him. He thinks like someone who wants proof to reach a court alive. There was no warmth in her voice toward me. She had distrusted the Eagle system from the moment she understood that battle produced growth. During a halt, she asked whether I had received experience for Afa's attack. No part in his defeat. If you had, the rule says hostile opponent. Roman or Northern does not matter. And if an officer arranged fights to feed you, helpless murder gives nothing. A staged opponent who was not truly hostile should give nothing. I have not tested every edge. Good. Do not turn uncertainty into doctrine. She asked how level 7 changed me. I gave the exact state and allocation. She made me repeat the costs. Wounds unchanged, exhaustion reduced but not gone. Skills still ranked, eagle sight still line of sight limited and damaging. Arrow step unable to answer hidden missiles, bad footing, crowded allies, smoke, darkness, or attacks from behind. Gaius will report the level and omit the limits, she said. His clerks recorded them. Clerks record what survives copying. We will make the limits expensive to remove. She had Lavinus enter my full state beside the medical inventory, then made the surgeon's assistant witness it. If Gaius claimed the raid proved invulnerability, the same tablet would show a torn hip, swollen wrist, rib impact, eye damage, and a split shield. The Alliance attacked once more 2 miles from the fort. No charge. A hidden archer loosed at the evidence wagon and vanished. The arrow killed Corvin. Arrow step did nothing because I never saw the bow. Eagle sight did nothing because darkness held the shooter. Hanno's tracking found a branch mark, then stopped at a stony wash. Rufus forbade pursuit. Corvin had survived captivity, fire, knives, and the charcoal camp. One hidden missile ended him. We wrapped him beside the contractor seal he had helped identify. Livia took his testimony tablet from Lavinus and pressed Corvin's thumb mark into the wax before the hand cooled, witnessed by Mara, Hanno, and Rufus. Evidence could survive a witness. It should not make his death feel tidy. The northern horns ceased when our fort tower answered from the dark. The cattle yard gave us walls, but not safety. Its fence reached a man's chest, built to turn cattle rather than arrows. Rufus set shields along the northern side and had civilians fill wicker pens with earth. Gaius placed cavalry at the gate. The villagers watched Romans take positions where raiders had stood 2 nights earlier and did not know which occupation would end worse. We had 4 hours before moonrise. The surgeon's assistant used the first on bodies. He removed the arrow from Pollio's calf, packed Flaccus's brow, checked Vibius's chest, and refused to let Ragin bleed merely because the prisoner had ordered killings. My hip binding came away red. The assistant pressed linen against the wound while telling me in detail what would happen if dirt entered it. None of the possibilities sounded like a heroic death. "Can you close it here?" I asked. "I can make it less open. The fort surgeon can close it if you stop proving that thread is weaker than stupidity." He bound my ribs and wrist again. Vitality 11 gave my body more reserve, not clean tissue. Endurance 12 let me remain awake through treatment, not skip it. Arrow step stirred whenever a shadow crossed the fire, but the surgeon ordered my ankles tied loosely together while I rested. Cassian would have admired the solution. Livia used the second hour to divide testimony before fear and conversation made every memory identical. Mara described the prisoner sheds to Lavinus. Hanno took Sen's statement through a second auxiliary rather than translate his own earlier questions. Rufus recorded the order of signals at Goat's Back. Tiro drew the east trail in ash, then copied it onto wax only after Flaccus independently marked the same branch. Gaius objected to questioning under threat. We march in hours. Summaries are sufficient. Summaries belong to whoever writes them, Livia said. Separate statements show where witnesses agree without teaching them to agree. She placed Ragin beyond hearing of Sen and Vibius beyond hearing of Afer. Prisoners received water before questioning. Not kindness alone. Thirst made men say what ended thirst. Sen claimed the alliance had gathered 5 oaths, though only 3 fought at the camp. Ragin claimed 7 and smiled when asked for names. The cattle-yard scout said 4. Livia did not average them into a convenient 6. She marked 3 proven by objects and coordinated action, 2 more plausible from tally symbols, and any others unverified. Livia kept the smallest claim the enemy could not knock down. Larger guesses stayed marked as guesses. The third hour belonged to anger. Dento's tentmates found the bound Goat's Back scout behind Rufus's grain wagon. Dento had taken a hidden arrow during the withdrawal after helping pull a litter through the drainage cut. His friends had carried his body only as far as Vella before the surgeon's assistant told them the inner column could not carry another dead man and 7 living wounded. They buried him beside the station guards. Grief returned from the grave, wanting a face. 4 legionaries dragged the scout into the cattle pen. They brought Ragin too, because a captain made better payment. A crowd formed without orders. Civilians whose families had been cut joined soldiers whose friends had been shot. The first stone came from a child. I could not force that crowd apart. Level 7 had given numbers, not authority, and my right arm could not lift the replacement shield. I stepped into the pen anyway. Rufus gave terms, I said. Rufus is on the north fence, one soldier answered. Then wait until he returns. They did not wait for Dento. The statement was true. It was also a road toward murder. Mara entered behind me. She had lost a brother in the first prisoner shed. She took the child's second stone and dropped it. Then she pointed at Ragin and spoke in her Hill language. Hanno translated. She says he must stand before every family and name who ordered the knives. Dead men answer nothing. The crowd shifted. Revenge and testimony pulled against each other. Gaius arrived before Rufus. He could have allowed the killing and called it heat after battle. Instead, he ordered cavalry into the pen and had the prisoners removed. He had learned the value of live proof, and he knew discipline publicly abandoned would return against officers. Any soldier who strikes a bound captive answers to his centurion, he said. Any civilian who attacks Roman custody loses Roman protection. The second sentence cut too broadly. Livia corrected it from beside the gate. An individual answers for an individual act. Families do not lose protection because a child throws a stone. Gaius looked toward the watching auxiliaries and revised. The offender alone. No blade fell. Captives survived Roman reprisal because Mara wanted answers. Livia narrowed the order. Gaius wanted evidence, and soldiers still recognized command. My body in the pen had delayed the first blow. It had not solved the danger. Rufus returned and assigned Dento's tentmates to the outer fence, away from prisoners. He did not humiliate them before civilians. At dawn, he said, they would face discipline. Until then, their anger could watch the ridge. The enemy used that division. A northern voice called Dento's name from beyond the fence. Then it named Pollio, Hanno, and Lucius Varro. The hidden speaker promised that Rome had sold every name already, and that Ragin knew which officer took silver. Soldiers turned toward Gaius. Prisoners turned toward Ragin. The voice had no need to prove anything. It only needed each group to suspect the one beside it. Tiro listened from the well. Same man moves after every sentence. North fence first, then east. Flaccus answered without asking me. He took 3 villagers who knew the drainage ditch and circled west under cattle hides. Rufus held archers in place until Flaccus flashed a polished bowl from behind the caller. The hidden man ran before Roman arrows loosed. He dropped a clay whistle and escaped into dark oak. Flaccus did not chase. In the abandoned position, he found a list of names written on a scrap from the Vella station roll. The enemy had initiated with trust as the target. Tiro found the pattern. Flaccus acted. Villagers guided. Rufus waited. No one defeated the caller, and I received nothing. The name scrap mattered for another reason. Livia placed it beside Vibius's bark dispatch. The same cramped hook appeared on the letter R. Vibius had copied the station roll or taught the hand that did. The evidence linked the false voice to the information network without pretending we had captured the speaker. The 4th hour began with water. A girl filling skins at the village well smelled bitter almonds and cried out. The bucket held crushed leaves bound around a stone. Whether the bundle was poison or only meant to look like poison did not matter. The enemy had reached the well after we entered. Gaius ordered the remaining water jars reserved for soldiers. 72 civilians heard him. Livia opened the wagon inventory. 6 sealed jars, 2 assigned to wounded, 4 sound. If soldiers take all 4, civilians march dry and collapse inside the formation. If soldiers collapse, no formation survives. Mara led villagers to a rain cistern behind the burned station. The water was muddy but clear of the well bundle. Hanno tasted none of it. He boiled a small cup with silver and watched for residue. An old hill habit, he admitted, could not reveal every poison. The surgeon's assistant inspected the cistern walls and found fresh rain flow. No dead animals, no plant bundle. He allowed it after boiling. Romans and civilians spent the final hour heating water in every intact pot. Soldiers used the sealed jars while the wounded and children drank first from boiled rain. Gaius's hard priority and Livia's logistics met in a plan neither would have made alone. The suspected well bundle later proved to be bitter laurel and animal gall, enough to sicken but probably not kill a grown man. Eagle sight could not identify poison. Ordinary smell, a girl's attention, and cautious labor kept it from deciding the march. Before departure, Livia performed one more count: 72 civilians living, 7 unable to walk, 9 hostile prisoners, 2 Roman detainees, 1 critically wounded clerk, 29 grain sacks, 4 sealed water jars, now half empty, 1 evidence chest under 3 seals, 3 grain door litters, 59 soldiers fit for the outer wall, and 6 who could march only inside it. You count people beside sacks, I said. No, she answered. I count sacks because people need to arrive. Gaius overheard, and if the count says leave 10 behind, then the record names who chose 10 and why. That was what made her dangerous. She could not always stop power. She could deny it the comfort of becoming an accident. We opened the cattle gate at moonrise. Dento's tent mates took the exposed rear position without complaint. Mara carried the oath cord beneath her cloak. Sen walked where Rufus could hear his warnings. Ragin walked where every rescued family could see he remained alive to answer. Tiro moved with Flaccus at the inner column's left. Livia held one key to the audit chest. Lavinus held the other. Gaius had designed a raid to expose, kill, or control me. The night at Vella had exposed something else. A column survived when command, records, witnesses, prisoners, and frightened civilians constrained one another. No single person owned the result. The fort lay 4 dark miles away. The gates opened before dawn. Secundus stood beneath the arch with 20 shields ready, though exhaustion hollowed his face. Tiro had sent a runner from Vella by a western path once the alliance withdrew, so the fort knew civilians came with us. The surgeon waited with litters. Cassian waited on one. He looked worse. The fever line had crossed the first charcoal mark, but stopped below the second after the surgeon reopened the leg wound. His face changed when he saw me walking. Then he saw the torn hip binding, broken hunting shield, and purple left eye. You have misunderstood staying alive, he said. Level 7. Numbers are not an excuse. I captured Arrow Step. Can you perform it? Badly. At last, an honest rank. Tiro went to him before he came to me. He reported Flaccus's cut, the Vella defense, the road message, and the statuses of everyone he had left. Cassian listened to the whole account. Allies did not pause their lives until I returned. The fort received 72 living civilians from the charcoal camp and Vella Road. Corvin made 73 when we began the withdrawal. We brought his body. The neck-cut woman lived. The old man found beneath the blanket lived. 7 seriously wounded went directly to the stone infirmary. Mara stayed with the children until each had water and a named place. Prisoners entered separately under Rufus's guard. The 9 hostile captives were Ragin, Sen, the guard pinned alive on the captive slope, the man bound after attacking Sen, the charcoal camp sentry, the cattle yard scout, the goat's back scout, and 2 fighters captured during withdrawal. Afer and the 2nd cavalryman entered as Roman detainees. Vibius entered on a grain door litter as the critically wounded clerk. None went to the cavalry cellar. Rufus placed all 12 in the stone store under his centurion's seal, Secundus's witness and the fort commander's authority. Odo and Beran remained alive. Odo's forearm was healing. Beran's cut upper arm had closed without fever. When Sen entered, the 3 men argued across the yard in words Nicanor could only partly translate. They belonged to different oaths and disagreed about Ragin's right to kill captives. Their conflict was evidence that alliance did not mean obedience in every matter. Sabinus sat outside with his shoulder still bound and feeling in all fingers. Marius's thigh wound remained clean. Fever had fallen enough for him to complain about broth. Nicanor's rib cut held, his broken teeth made speech thick, and he identified the dolphin contractor seal as belonging to Lucius Cado, a hauler based at the southern station. Flaccus received 5 stitches above the brow and tried to call them decoration. The surgeon disagreed. My own examination took long enough for Gaius to begin his victory report without me. The hip wound had torn through 1 stitch and stretched 2 others. The surgeon cleaned and closed it a 3rd time. My right wrist was not broken, but the ligaments had swollen from shield impacts and grappling. He replaced the splint from elbow to palm. The sling blow had bruised 2 ribs without cracking them. Eye bleeding had not resumed, but purple shadow and headache showed I had violated rest. The scalp cut remained closed. Throat bruising had improved. Exhaustion sat beneath endurance 12 rather than disappearing. No eagle sight for 5 days, he said. 3 became 5? You spent the missing 2. He ordered no shield wall, no hard shield hook, no arrow step beyond slow flat ground drill, and no spear check against a charge until the hip sealed. Skill echo gave knowledge. Injury set workload. Cassian approved every restriction and added 20 repetitions of arrow step performed with no weapon and no speed, once the surgeon permitted them. A missile skill begins with looking, he said. Tiro calls the release. You move only if you know the ground. Hidden pebble means you fail. Gaius's report named a decisive punitive victory under his command. It listed 3 enemy groups dispersed, stores denied, a captain captured, and Roman civilians recovered. All were true. It called me an evaluated special asset who had advanced 2 levels under directed exposure. That was also true in the ugliest available phrasing. Livia placed the audit chest on the command table before he could finish. Under 3 seals, it held Sen's tally stick marked by reed, white mane, and boar counts, the scraped wax root strip from his pouch, the 3 oath cord, the contractor's clay dolphin, the fire-damaged bark dispatch listing stations and payments, Vella's false grain stamp, wheel width measurements, oat issues, captured root copies, Corvin's witnessed statement, Mara's statement, Sen's statement, Ragin's identity, and the contradictory cavalry depositions. Flaccus added Secundus's copied fort issue records. Nicanor identified the contractor. Hanno testified to the joined attack at Goat's Back. Rufus testified that 3 oath groups fought under coordinated signals and that Ragin commanded the center in Armin's name. Tiro described the East Trail and the scouts surrounding Vella. Each witness owned a piece. Removing me would not remove the case. The fort commander read the tally counts aloud. Read, 40 spears and 12 grain measures, white mane, 30 bows and scouts, bore, 60 shields and distribution authority. Other marks indicated groups not present at the camp. This was more than scouts sharing a road. It was an actionable northern alliance with supply allotments, troop counts, command signals, prisoner policy disputes, and a Roman information channel. Secundus then forced the custody question into the same hearing. Gaius's first order had named me a protected staff subject, granted rations and treatment, and forbidden free movement. The raid order had moved that subject into a forward file without ending the protection. Rufus asked whether I returned as prisoner, staff property, recruit, or soldier. Gaius answered that I remained under evaluation until his report was accepted. Then record who bears responsibility for sending a medically restricted subject under arrows, Livia said. Laemido set his stylus to wax. Gaius stopped him. Varro marched under military duty, the tribune said. Military duty belongs to a soldier, Rufus replied. Property does not obey, it is carried. The distinction had been waiting inside Gaius's generous nouns since the holding yard. He could preserve control by calling me property, but then every dangerous order became his private use of a damaged captive. He could call me a soldier, but soldiers possessed standing, witnesses, discipline, and claims within the chain. Gaius chose neither yet. His conduct will be reviewed before the assembled officers. Until then, he receives infirmary liberty under guard. The inward-facing cavalryman left my door. 2 legionaries from Rufus's century took the outer infirmary watch, facing the yard. I still could not leave the fort, carry a shield, or refuse a lawful medical examination. For the first time since the gate closed between Cassian, Tiro, and me, custody had a boundary other men could see and question. We had survived Gaius's punitive raid and returned with more than wounded pride. 72 civilians stood alive behind Roman walls. All 12 prisoners remained under seals instead of becoming convenient corpses. The alliance evidence sat on the command table where rank could not pretend it was rumor. Only after that did Gaius decide what I had become. Rufus requested a formal conduct hearing in the Principia yard. Gaius could have refused. His own report praised the raid, and too many soldiers had heard it. Refusing recognition while claiming my victories would expose the test for what it was. The fort commander sat as witness. Secundus stood with Marcellus's damaged signum. Cassian remained on a litter. Tiro stood with the recruit pool, stitched arm bound. Livia attended because the evidence and casualty accounts were hers to protect, not because I was being honored. Rufus gave conduct, not power, as the reason. I had obeyed withdrawal limits during the charcoal pursuit. I had helped defeat armed opponents without killing surrendered men. I had entered the captive slope before orders reached it, which he called dangerous and necessary. I had protected Roman records, northern civilians, and hostile prisoners. I had returned to formation after each independent action. I had accepted correction when arrow step failed. I had not claimed victories earned by others. He also named failures. I left his second rank beside Ragin and forced Hanno to close my gap. I used eagle sight against medical order. I practiced an undrilled echo during withdrawal and knocked Pollio open to attack. I tore a wound 3 times. Recognition did not require pretending competence was complete. Gaius asked whether Rufus recommended punishment for leaving rank. Yes, Rufus said, drill duty when fit, and recognition as legionary, so future discipline has a lawful place to land. A recruit levied in haste could serve, bleed, and die without ever receiving the full standing of a trained soldier on the roll. Gaius had used that uncertainty to call me subject, asset, and recruit according to need. Rufus ended it with a request entered before officers. Gaius made the politically intelligent choice. Lucius Varro has survived a field evaluation, contributed to the defeat of hostile forces, protected Roman dependence, and returned military intelligence of immediate value, he said. His irregular gift remains under command review. His conduct, however, meets the requirement of service. Enter him on the legionary roll attached provisionally to Rufus's century. Lavinus wrote my name. No trumpet sounded, no golden eagle appeared. The system offered no experience for recognition. I received a service belt, a replacement rectangular scutum I was forbidden to lift until the surgeon allowed it, and an obligation to obey a chain whose strongest link that morning was a centurion willing to list my failures. Cassian raised 2 fingers from his litter. Not a salute, an acknowledgement. Tiro grinned. Does a legionary snore differently? Only at higher pay. You have not been paid. Then listen cheaply. Gaius called me aside after the roll. You think Rufus has freed you from my authority? No. Good. You advanced from level 5 to level 7 in one operation I designed. Your survival proves my judgment. Your promotion proves my generosity. The captives prove your raid found something other than its intended target. He did not threaten me. He adjusted the collar. As a recognized legionary, you can be ordered into battle without the awkward language of protected custody. Cassian can be assigned elsewhere. Tiro can be transferred. Rufus can be promoted or charged. Livia's appointment can expire. Law gives shape to power, Varro. It does not remove it. Shape decides what a blade can cut, he smiled. Livia has already taught you to speak in accounts. Be careful. Auditors make allies until they audit you. He left to dispatch warning south about the alliance. He sent copies by 3 routes, each with slightly different troop totals. Livia approved the method because a leaked version could identify the channel. Gaius was dangerous enough to learn. In the infirmary yard, Cassian demanded my full system state. Lucius Varro. Level 7, Experience 0 of 1,600, Strength 10, Endurance 12, Agility 12, Vitality 11, Intelligence 13, Skill Echoes, Shield Hook Practiced, Spear Check Novice, Arrow Step Novice, Echo Slots 3 of 3. I repeated every award: Road Ambush 130, Vella Cattle Yard 170, Sen at the Charcoal Track 250, Goat's Back Scout 350, 900 total to level 6, no overflow. Then Hostage Guard 220, Armed Vibius 280, Ragin 400, Vela Track Shieldmen 300, 1200 total to level 7, no overflow. Level 6 granted 2 points, Agility 11 to 12, Vitality 10 to 11. Level 7 granted 2, Endurance 11 to 12, Intelligence 12 to 13. Strength stayed 10. Cassian made Tiro check the sum with beans. Livia checked it from the doorway without asking permission. Secundus checked the medical costs beside it. No one let the golden tablet become the only tablet. Arrow Step filled the last slot. I demonstrated one slow lateral move on flat paving after the surgeon allowed it. Tiro hid a pebble beneath loose straw. My outside foot landed on it and rolled. Cassian caught me before the hip tore again. What did you learn? Visible release, sound footing, short movement, room beside me, timing after commitment. And it cannot dodge what I do not see. It cannot replace awareness. Good, novice. The title did not sting, it fit. By afternoon, the fort changed from refuge to headquarters. Riders carried alliance warnings south and west. Rufus doubled ridge patrols but forbade them to chase horns. Secundus began rebuilding Marcellus's sentry roll around survivors rather than pretending the dead formation remained whole. Tiro was assigned to signal drill under Flaccus until his arm healed. Cassian remained in the infirmary under strict rest, which he interpreted as permission to criticize everyone within earshot. Livia took over the burned storehouse table. She did not celebrate exposing fraud, she reconciled it. First, she matched the Southern contractor seal to Nicanor's memory and the fort's old invoices. Then she compared wheel widths from Vella with issue measurements. She separated true grain loss from grain sacrificed at Goat's Back, grain recovered from the camp, and grain spoiled to deny pursuit. She made Lavinus write civilian rations as protection expenditure rather than missing stores. Records could determine whether rescued people ate tomorrow. I sat across from her because the surgeon had forbidden useful movement. My replacement scutum rested against the wall beyond reach. Livia gave me Corvin's testimony to read, then remembered I could not read a clerk's hand quickly. Intelligence 13, she said. Does that not include letters? It includes noticing when an auditor insults me. She almost smiled. The system improves capacity, not education. Good. Another limit for the record. She read aloud. Corvin had seen Vibius pay informants with clipped Roman denarii. The bark dispatch listed payment amounts beside clan marks, but one repeated symbol did not belong to any northern oath. It was a small 7-point star used in Gaius's staff cipher to mark private disbursement. Gaius joined us before she explained further. He had removed the torn white cloak and wore a plain officer's mantle. My cipher proves theft from my office. Perhaps, Livia said, you enjoy that word. It keeps innocent men alive until nouns earn certainty. She compared the bark figures with Fort and Southern Station account copies. The amounts did not appear under intelligence payments. They appeared as mule replacements, road repairs, lamp oil, and burial cloth. Small costs, ordinary losses, spread across 6 months so no single tablet looked wrong. Caldis, Gaius said, the staff quartermaster had vanished during our return. The inner postern guard claimed he carried Gaius's seal and an order to inspect the river sheds. His horse remained in the stable. A fisherman reported a man crossing the southern shallows on foot before dawn. Gaius ordered pursuit. Rufus sent it under a centurion. No one rode alone. Livia kept working after the obvious culprit acquired a name. She laid transparent horn scraps over copies so columns aligned. The false expenses matched the payment list, but the direction of money did not. Caldus had not merely stolen Roman funds and sold information. Several payments entered his account first from private remittances arriving out of Italy. Whose? I asked. The sender uses estate numbers, not names. Gaius knew the numbering system. His face changed by less than a breath. Senatorial properties. Many families share agents. Livia looked at him. Including yours? Including half the men who could appoint your uncle to anything. She did not retreat. Then half the men can answer a clean audit. The light outside hurt my eyes. I closed them and listened to wax scrape. Records had their own battlefield sounds. Stylus point, tablet turned, seal warmed, breath held over a matching sum. Livia found the final link near dusk in a burial cloth expense from 3 months earlier. The payee mark matched the 7-point star. Beside it, squeezed into the margin in Vibius's hand, stood 2 letters used on the bark dispatch for Armin Seric. Not payment to fight Armin. Payment assigned through his channel. She traced the next line. Roman silver had funded informants who gave Armin recruit descriptions, route copies, supply departures, and perhaps my name before Marcellus marched. The money had not simply leaked north through greed. Someone in Roman accounts was purchasing Armin's informant network. Gaius took 1 step toward the table and stopped before touching anything. Livia placed her seal over the margin. Lavinus added his. I could not serve as a legal account witness merely because my intelligence had risen. Rufus and the fort commander came when summoned. 4 ordinary seals closed around the dangerous line. We had returned with proof of the Northern Alliance. Livia had found the Roman hand feeding its eyes. She looked at Gaius, not at me. Tribune, she said, these are not stolen payments. They were authorized. Outside the storehouse, the warning trumpets began carrying our alliance report toward Rome. Inside, no one yet knew which Roman had paid for Armin to hear it first.